Where am I from? Well, my father was Scottish, my mother was English, but came from the Channel Islands, born in Jersey. I was born in Wales, but then we left Wales after 5 months and went to Nigeria, where I lived for 4 years. Then it was expat life. There was Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, then Hong Kong. And then I was sent back to school, to a very traditional prep school and then public school in the south of England, which I loved. And then I've ended up, after a brief stint in London, living back here in the south of England, in Kent. And I suppose where I've ended up is an England that I always believed in, a sort of expat's vision of England. I suppose I'm from everywhere and then nowhere in particular, but I do feel that I belong here, really. There's a great poem by William Cowper in which he says at one point, "England, with all thy faults, I love thee still." I've always felt that.
Ian Hislop lives in Kent with his wife Victoria, daughter Emily and son William.
We had a walled house, sort of very arid.
His own childhood was caught on film by his father.
Is that you?
Oh, that's me with a broken arm.
What's he done?
I fell out of a window on my birthday party when I was 3, I think.
Oh, look at you.
Oh, dear.
Naked
footage, I don't think we want this. Yeah, no, this has gone on long enough. Let's lose this. Oh, look, still Walker.
My goodness.
God, he's good, isn't he?
I've never seen that.
I didn't watch this stuff because it was just in a box and it was Super 8 and it was all slightly... Now, there's my dad. There's the Brit abroad. White socks, chap in shorts.
Well, you never take your socks off now, do you?
Not if I can help it. Ah, there's Mum looking glam. Full sunglass mode. I feel, having watched a lot of the footage, that the camera is essentially pointed the wrong way. We all point the camera at our children, and actually they're the ones who are going to be watching it when they find it in a trunk and it's part of their heirloom, and the camera should be pointing back at us. And I wish there'd been more of my father. I mean, he's behind the camera, or it's just tantalising shots of him.
The Hislops owed their globe-trotting lifestyle to Ian's father David's career as a civil engineer.
I think I haven't looked back because Dad died young and because it's associated with a certain amount of sadness and a childhood that was sort of great but somehow ended. Then I haven't really dwelt on it. My father died when I was a child. I was only about 12, and my mother died pretty young too. So in a sense, I felt a bit orphaned, not only in the technical sense, but I'm slightly orphaned from their history because of the age differences. I didn't know either of my grandfathers. I didn't know them at all. But I'd like to know who they were and how they lived and what they went through, which is so different to what, the relatively peaceful and placid life that my generation's been given.
On both sides of the family, Ian's grandfathers were soldiers, fighting for king and country in an entirely different age. Ian's grandfather on his father's side fought in the First World War. Meanwhile, on his mother's side, Ian's grandfather William Beddoes fought as long ago as the Boer War and lived long enough to suffer alongside his daughter during the Second World War. It was the Beddoes' misfortune to live in the Channel Islands.
My mother was born here in Jersey, and she grew up here, and she left in her late teens and never really came back. And I think it's because Jersey was occupied by the Germans during the war, and I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Jersey was invaded on July the 1st, 1940. It was Ian's mother's 11th birthday. The occupation lasted 5 years. A garrison of 13,000 defended it, from the Allies. 1 German for every 3 islanders.
My mother didn't talk about it much, and I didn't ask the right questions at the time. I'm not interested enough or just didn't press her. But now, I'm fascinated to know what it would be like to be in the only bit of Britain that was occupied by the Germans. What was that like?
Ian's mother died more than a decade ago, and he last spent time in Jersey as a child on family holidays. So he scarcely knows many of his mother's relatives and childhood friends.
Hello. Well, hello. Reeves said hello.
You're so like her. Every time I look at you, I think you've got that wicked smile, that grin. And she had a wicked sense of humour.
We can actually from here see where your mother was actually born.
Right.
Do you see the
Is there a
road
plaque?
going down? No, but there's a blue sign and it says car park.
Oh, how glamorous.
Well, that's the house. That's called Glen Rose, where
Right.
she was born and lived until occupation. Well, this is the wedding one.
Right. There's you.
There's me. And I know the dress was yellow.
There's my mum and dad.
Because your mother always loved freesias, didn't she?
Now there's my grandfather,
Ah,
my
I
dad's
wonder-
father.
That was your dad's father, right?
Yeah.
This picture would have been
Oh, that's
at the
here?
reception. Yes, sir.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
60 years after liberation, the occupation is still etched deep in the memories of everyone who endured it.
The frustration of being stuck here and wanting to do things and knowing, I mean, you couldn't have a resistance, there were no woods that they could... But they
No,
were,
so there's
you
not a
know,
lot of places
it
to
was-
hide, are
There
there?
was a lot of sort of boiling feelings going on.
What were you doing during the occupation then?
Trying to make something from nothing.
Im Schutz der deutschen Wehrmacht geht das Leben auf den Inseln wieder seinen gewohnten Gang.
Under the Nazis, Jersey's government, legal system and police force continued, neutered of real power, but struggling to act as a buffer between ordinary people and the German commandant. Jersey's archives house the wartime registration cards the Germans required of each islander.
It's a much older picture of my grandfather than any I've ever seen. The moustache less military. They must have known he was in the army. The adults look worried, unconfident. My mother still looks childish. No, never seen a picture of my mother that young. The ones I've seen start about 18. That's actually her during the war. That is an amazing image. Sort of thing that appears in pot boiler thrillers. What if the Germans had taken over Britain and there's a sort of soldier and a policeman? Except they did take over a bit of it, and that's real. It's an amazing shot. I think it's the juxtaposition of seeing them in what you think's a British context. I mean, that's a bookshop, and they're selling the Decline and Fall of the British Empire. You know, that looks like a classic British cinema. And it's got swastikas on it, and it's showing propaganda films. Again, they are the stuff of nightmare. I mean, Hitler must have thought it was the most fantastic propaganda. Well, a swastika picked out in flowers. I remember my mother saying there were two images. There was the image of them goose stepping in and then being shipped out on the boats in rags. It sort of framed the war for her.
Jersey's favourite summer haunt in the 1930s was St Helier's Lido. Once the war started, most islanders avoided it because it was full of German soldiers.
Show you a few swear words.
Now Ian's mother's closest school friend, Iris Lefevre, is taking Ian there to meet some old classmates.
They're sitting down there. Yes, there they are.
You must be John.
Hello, Ian.
Hello, I'm
Lovely
Ian.
to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
Under occupation and cut off from normal supplies, these teenagers grew up in the most unusual circumstances.
It does sound quite grim. I mean, you must have been hungry. The clothes were very grey.
Remember the clogs?
Oh, the
We had these wooden clogs.
We had a
They were a
Russian
flat piece of wood, about that thick, and shaped like a foot. solid, no give at all.
Yeah.
2 pieces of car tyre, nails
Underneath, yeah.
underneath, and a piece on the heel, and a piece of canvas over the top. And you got into those, and boy, you knew you had shoes on.
I had bleeding ankles because as you walked along,
You're such a stoic lot. She says, I've got bleeding ankles, and you all laugh. You two must have been coming up to 16, 17, to an age when it could have been beginning to get difficult. There were German soldiers there. There were not a lot of boys your age around.
I think I only thought about food.
We had 9 days without bread. And I'm not a religious person, but I can remember in assembly saying the words, give us this day our daily bread, and we didn't have any.
Putting a brave face on things, Ian's mother and her teenage friends managed to do more than just get by. Their favourite hangout gave them a chance to dance, even if its record collection was limited. The Oxenford House Club's founder, Miss Lucy Maney, is now 98.
Oh, there we are. Oxenford House in St Lawrence.
My dad bought it, you see.
Right. Did you have a ballroom?
Of course it. Well, where we would have held the dances, if I hadn't had a ballroom there.
Good question. Was it a good place to go to meet the opposite sex?
Well, of course it was. If they wanted to come, I didn't tell anyone what they must do, Maria.
No, I'm not accusing you of running anything, really.
You're very interested now, I can see.
I am. I like this idea. So the Germans allowed you to have the club, and they didn't interfere?
Not interfere at all. They only came down twice, I think.
And why did they come down?
They wanted to look round, of course. Why would they come down, you silly man?
It's difficult for people of my generation because we know that Britain won, whereas
That's right.
you didn't know the end of the story. And I'm just fascinated to find out that you always thought you'd win.
Of course I did. It never occurred to me that we wouldn't win.
I think I understand now why my mother didn't want to talk about it or go on about it. You know, I get the feeling they were scared of boring us. Oh, blimey, you know, we had it tough. It was awful in the war. We had clogs. Well, they did have clogs, actually. And it's quite interesting to hear about it. Whenever I'm confronted by people of that generation, I'm always impressed by what they did and hopeful that I would have behaved in the same way. But part of me worries that I wouldn't.
Ian's mother's reticence had been frustrating, but the early death of his father meant Ian knew even less about the Scottish side of his family, and nothing at all about his grandfather's First World War experiences with the Highland Light Infantry. Ian's grandfather, called like his father, David Hislop, died shortly before Ian was born. David Hislop came from Ayr, on the coast southwest of Glasgow. But apart from his stint at the front, he stayed all his life, working as a teacher and latterly headmaster.
Well, that's quite bizarre. James Hislop. I wonder if he's a relative. I remember coming back here once and we walked along the seafront and then went to see the house where my grandfather lived, which seems a pretty good place to start.
The two David Hislops, father and son, lived at 39 Blackburn Drive. Ian's grandmother had died when Ian's father was just 7.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Boy being reared just alone with his dad.
Yeah.
But he was a very nice boy, whoever raised him. I think they've probably been...
Betty Bird knows the house well. Her father was Ian's grandfather's best friend and a fellow teacher.
Everything does.
And I had no idea that you were David's son.
Really?
None.
What about my granddad? I look like him?
Yes, he was quite round in the face.
Oh, thank you. That's what we're going for. The round-faced look.
He was quite round. And he had a cheerful face. Yes, a twinkle.
Yeah? Was he a cheerful soul?
I think so. I mean, I couldn't see what he was like at home. Four walls, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't talk about family things. It wasn't, you know, Oprah Winfrey.
No.
I think in these days, private family matters were kept private.
Yeah.
You know, the world has changed so much. I don't think we could live in this world. I find it difficult sometimes.
So you think it would be too complicated now?
It would be too much for them. They couldn't stand it. What they could stand least of all are the kind of jokes you hear on television. Sometimes I've thought, when I watched you, I don't know whether I'm right or not, I sometimes sense a little sort of Presbyterian disapproval. And now that I know you're David's son, I'm more sure than
Yeah, you think it's in there, is
I
there?
think there's a little bit of ghost hanging around there that thinks, no, this is a bit too much. Is that right?
Sounds fairly accurate to
Yes.
me.
In common with so many Scots of that era, Ian's grandfather's Presbyterian faith was the most vital influence on his life. At Newton-on-Ayr Church, he taught at Sunday school, marched in the ranks, and served as an officer in its boys' brigade. Ian has asked an expert in Scottish religion, Professor Callum Brown, to help him make sense of his grandfather's religious writings.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, Ian.
Very nice to meet you. I don't have much left from my grandfather, there's very little. But somehow these three rather moth-eaten sermons survived in a trunk. I presume these are sermons or talks that he gave.
They read to me like addresses to organisations of young people. This is a man who's experienced war. He's been tested.
The first talk is about the Confessions of St. Augustine. He's talking about Carthage, where the young Augustine went. And he describes it as the capital city of North Africa, which led the way in the new cult of licentiousness. The city was given up to pleasure-seeking and wickedness, and immorality stalked about naked and unashamed. At first, the pleasures of the city made little appeal, but as he became more used to his surroundings, he began to find himself drawn more and more into the whirlpool of vice.
To me, there are two key sentences. One is, all our training, all our education is an assertion of something and a repression of something else.
Mm.
And your grandfather went on to be a teacher and a headmaster, and that's a very interesting philosophy of what education and purpose is about.
There's an image of him. He wished he had an X-ray of his soul, so he could see how he was doing, which bits of it were sort of muscular and which bits had sort of got flabby. But they hadn't got the technology yet for that.
Do you see aspects of him in you? Is there a bit of Hislop DNA transmitting itself?
I suppose when I look at him and I read what he'd done, and beyond the sort of the fact that distant lends it a sort of comic value, which it does, but beyond that, I can feel myself sympathising with what he's aiming to do. So I think there is something running through.
In the early 20th century, the most popular and public act of self-repression was to join the Temperance movement. Ian's grandfather is thought to have been teetotal. His fellow churchgoer and fond pupil, 90-year-old Peggy McCrindle, still is.
Gosh, they're quite strong, aren't they, these adverts?
Yes, yes they are.
Not me.
No.
And it's a bulldog.
Yes.
That's very good propaganda.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, and there's one with a Union Jack on it. L is for liquor, our nation's disgrace. If all would avoid it, 'twould safeguard the race.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yes.
So you must have taken this pledge.
I did.
So you've kept that promise from age 7 till now?
I did, yes.
That's a pretty good promise.
It is a good one. It's a long one.
4 days is my record. January the 1st to the 5th.
In the 1930s, Ian's grandfather switched to another church in Ayr, Sandgate, where ultimately he was ordained as its deacon.
Ah, it's a pub. He would have loved that. The Temperance movement completely defeated by Wetherspoons. This is extraordinary. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Till closing time's worth. There's gambling, there's drinking, there's smoking. Not much sign of fornication, but I suppose it's only 5 o'clock. Perfect spot for a sermon about temperance and the evils of drink. I almost feel like delivering it. I think it was Betty who I spoke to who said that my grandfather and her grandfather would not have been able to cope with this century at all. And I have a feeling this might have really been too much. I mean, as a theme pub, an old Presbyterian church, it's probably one too far, isn't it?
Ian's grandfather's professional life was as consistent as his beliefs. After returning from the First World War, he spent his entire career in one school.
Newton Academy.
The school is now closed, the surrounding tenements long since gone.
Now Newton House.
One member of staff from that era remembers him well.
So he taught here for 40 years.
He did.
Amazing.
Now this was the boys' side, that was the girls' side. If you're round the back, there's a big wall separates them. Name the two you shall meet. Now, come to dinner, the boys would line up, if you were supervising, you stood with the belt there, and every boy come in, hands like that, and you inspect them.
Well, so
any
they're
bit
clean.
of dirt, stand to side. Stand to side. When you get them all in, you belted them, they washed their hands, and you said grace, heads down. Not a word had to be spoken. It was great.
Sounds like another world. It's so difficult trying to reconstruct what type of man he was, because all I've got is fragments.
I'd say he was about the best headmaster I knew.
Did he ever talk to you about the war, the First World War?
He did. Your grandfather, he went out to France.
Right, you're sure of that?
Yes, and he spoke about the kilt as a method of dress during the First World War for fighting in.
Yeah, incredible.
Like your grandfather said, it was the worst piece of equipment that a soldier could have.
Yeah.
When it rained, it got heavy, it went away down there. And then in the winter time, the hem was all wet, it froze.
Oh,
he said, and it cut their legs. To prevent that, they wound bandages or putties round their knees, and then they urinated on them.
Stiffen them up.
I suppose the ammonia and the urine would maybe help the cuts.
Oh, grim. Did he talk about anything else?
It seems that he was wrongly accused by a regimental sergeant major of temporarily deserting his post.
Oh, yes.
And the sergeant major wouldn't listen to reason.
Right.
So your grandfather thumped him.
Right.
And was reduced to a private.
Right. You don't know where that was?
No, I just know somewhere in France in the front line.
Right. God, fascinating.
Along with millions of others, David Hislop's First World War service record was destroyed in the Blitz. So though Ian now knows far more about his grandfather's life in Ayr, the war years remain a mystery.
Ironically, we've had the one single hard piece of evidence about what my grandfather was doing in the war in the family all along. It's a postcard to my grandfather, to dear old friend David, from a young Frenchman, seen there in military uniform. And in his postcard, he makes it clear that he is writing to thank my grandfather for liberating him and presumably his family in Clary, which is in northern France. That's the only time we know exactly where he was, which was in October 1918, which would be barely a month before the end of the war.
Come on.
Let's go.
Ian has recruited the rest of his family for his trip to the First World War battlefields in search of his grandfather.
Ah, there we go.
It's
Place des
called...
Écossais, which means the place of the Scotsman, i.e. your great-grandfather. 9th of October 1918.
Clary has never forgotten what it owes to the Scottish regiments, so its mayor was determined to greet Ian in person.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour, Madame Foulon.
C'est vous le descendant
Oui, oui, c'est mon
du monsieur
grand-père.
qui s'est bien illustré, qui était...
Ah oui, il est dans le régiment écossais,
oui.
Le Highland Light Infantry, avec le kilt.
Entendu?
Pardon?
Ils ont joué du biniou écossais.
Du biniou.
Le biniou.
Ah oui,
the
le bagpipe, le biniou, ah oui.
Here, you can't.
Oh dear, my French really won't do.
Monsieur,
That was
je
lucky.
vous invite à prendre le verre de l'amitié
Ah,
à la mairie.
I'd be rude not to. Merci beaucoup.
Mais je vous en prie.
À Clary.
L'Écosse.
À l'Écosse, oui.
À l'Écosse. Et vive les Écossais.
Et vive les Écossais.
Voilà. Et l'équipe. Et les binious.
Et les binious, et les kilts, yeah, oui.
Ian's grandfather's units only reached Clary after a month of intense fighting. They're part of the big push to breach the indomitable German defence called the Hindenburg Line. The sector occupied by the 9th Highland Light Infantry was known as the Targel Ravine.
I think it's the start. The trenches are down there, they were all in the trenches waiting for an order, and it came through about 10 o'clock at night. It's tomorrow morning, you're going up the valley.
For their war walk, the family have brought with them a regimental history, written by one of the officers.
It says in these sort of company memoirs of someone who was there that they had already discussed the scheme and thought this isn't practical, but they did it anyway. Your grandfather, they were in a trench here. They had to get out, stand up on these tapes, and they would look, I mean, it's...
Out where the cross is?
Yeah, where the cross is. That's where they had to get to. That's where the Germans were. In the grey dawn of a misty morning at 10 minutes to 6, the artillery barrage opened. That's our artillery, trying to soften up the Germans. It says here, the field guns did their best, but the 4-minute barrage was rather thin. I think that's probably British understatement, isn't it? It was obviously no use at all.
Then the Highlanders advanced through the mist. As soon as our men showed themselves, 3 advanced machine guns opened fire, causing some loss.
The Highlanders jumped into the trench, bayoneted the garrison and bombed the dugouts. The Highlanders went on, and the centre reached Gloucester Road, which is up here, so we're retreading the way they ran up in the mud. By the time they'd got to here, they'd lost 4 officers and 80 men, were either wounded or killed.
The fog was now thicker, and under its cover the Highlanders continued the advance.
And the trouble is they know that if the fog lifts, they've had it.
It was a blessing, because the fog screened our men, for the time being, from the murderous fire. A curse, because the Highlanders reached an isolated position, far beyond the troops in their flanks.
8:45, the fog cleared. So the fact they'd got to here, suddenly everything was visible again, so the Germans started pounding them with the guns. At 11 a.m, it was decided to abandon all that remained of the captured positions. So everything new that had been taken, all the ground they'd made up, they decided to abandon. And by this stage, our casualties now amounted to 9 officers and 350 men. That's about half of the people who started. So after a whole day and losing 350 men, they abandoned everything they'd achieved in the day. But the next morning, which is even more extraordinary, the Germans cleared out. They cleared out of everywhere. And at 11 a.m. the battalion advanced down the valley unopposed. So in the grand scheme of the war, although it looks like they achieved nothing, the Germans did pull back and they moved forward. I'm not sure it would have felt like that at the time though, would it?
No.
"29th of September, dates all the same. This row, this row, this row, this row, that row. It's just ranks of them.
My grandfather, it was luck, wasn't it? He's not here.
Yeah.
Do you think that you and people today are lesser men for not having lived through this kind of thing?
Well, Dr. Johnson says every man thinks meanly of himself for not having been a soldier. I think it's probably still true.
So a little bit of you, envisaging this horror, wonders how you might have coped.
Yes, I think everybody when confronted by this thinks, would I have done this? Would I have run away that way? Would I have wanted to? Probably yes. I don't know, yes. You ask all those questions. The idea that I would have strode up there in a kilt and lived to liberate a town up the village, I mean, it all seems incredible.
And when you ask yourself those questions, what do you think the answers are?
The answer is one doesn't know. I suspect the worst. Well, I found out a great deal about my Scottish grandfather, my father's father, but I always knew more about my mother's father, another soldier. I knew he'd fought in the Boer War. He was much older, and I have 2 photographs of him as a young man. And actually, when I was at school, I'd done a project on the Boer War, which I still have. I was, I think, 11, and it's 2 volumes, my work on the Boer War. Quite detailed, particularly good maps, if you're a battlefield specialist. So I was obviously pretty interested pretty early.
Though he had ended his life in Jersey, William Beddoes was originally from Lancashire and joined the Royal Lancashire Regiment when he was just 18. So he was one of the first onto the troop ships when war broke out in 1899 in faraway South Africa. The British Empire itself, commonly regarded, at least in Britain, as the greatest achievement in human history, seemed at stake. The enemy were the Boers, the descendants of the original Dutch settlers in the Cape. For them, ignorant of the virtues of empire, this was a fight for freedom and independence over what they saw as their land. The recent discovery of vast fields of gold made this land about the most valuable on earth.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frank. I'm your tour guide today. Welcome to this lovely tour of the British in Cape Town.
Sounds good to me.
I want you to see the Parliament buildings. A very interesting person whom you probably see there is Queen Victoria. Just look under the tree.
Oh, there she is, yes.
Oh, yeah. Our City Hall was built in 1901. Can you believe the stone had to come all the way from Bath in England? I don't know how they shipped it.
We had to do one long project in history. I obviously decided I would do the Boer War. I mean, I clearly didn't know quite how large subject it was, and I must have got terribly engaged.
The war in South Africa, it was about the gold. And you must remember that Britain actually forced the Boers to go to war.
War was not a natural thing to the Boer. There seemed no point to him to die for his country, like the British. He fought to live, for himself and his family. There was no romance in a battlefield, or in a battle for that matter. It was not a war that concerned the vast number of people who lived here.
You would say so, but when you look at it, a lot of black people ended up siding with either two parties, and it was never reported.
Yes, I mean, they were co-opted, but it wasn't their war, was it?
No, it wasn't their war, yes.
This brings us to the condition and state of fighting efficiency that the British Army was in. It was described at the time as a crowd of men in uniform. Its ranks came from the unskilled, but not hopelessly so, the labouring class, who were in general poorly educated. And that would have included my grandfather, of course, who was described on his call-up papers as a labourer.
Right in front of us, we got the Nelly. That's the Mount Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
You'll find that in the afternoon they serve the afternoon teas. Scones and jam and cream and cheese.
Nowadays, I'm rather more ambivalent about the virtues of empire than I was at age 11. I can still see, particularly coming here, what was attractive to a small boy, the dream, the vision, that absurd sort of imperial romance that a place like this embodies. The almost absurd assumption that it would be perfectly reasonable for Britain to rule from Cape to Cairo and indeed everywhere else. Maybe that's what motivated my grandfather. He would have left Britain and the crowds were cheering and the flags were waving and people were singing Rule Britannia, and he came out, everyone being told that democracy must be established here. The Boers were trying to stop that. Only the British could actually make this place decently run, and out they came. And then he lands here, and almost immediately was shunted up to Durban and straight into the firing line. And that's the journey that I want to make.
On the 16th of January 1900, William Beddoes and the Royal Lancaster Regiment reached the Tugela River, 900 miles northeast of Cape Town. Their mission, to get over a line of steep Boer-held hills immediately ahead, the highest known as Spion Kop.
Are you ready to take your position? My name is Tonto.
Tonto?
Yeah. Yeah, Tonto.
Right.
All right, you try to get up there. Let me help you up. Big jump. There we go.
Okay, shall we head out? Now, my grandfather had to walk all the way up. There's a great view of Spion Kop coming up just here.
Absolutely superb.
What does Kop mean?
Kop means hill.
Right.
Spion, spy, so Spy Hill.
The British goal was to relieve the town of Ladysmith, 40 miles to the north, where British forces had been humiliatingly besieged by the Boers for several months. But the truth was General Warren, commanding the operation, had given little or no thought how to break through.
Warren had taken the decision. Now, how was he actually going to get onto this hill? It's held by the enemy.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know how many are there, doesn't really know what it looks like on top. And he decides that the only way he can actually do it is under the cover of darkness. The going was extremely difficult. And there's a description in the regimental history of the Royal Lancs, and it says, "The night was intensely dark with a gentle drizzle, and as the column advanced, the hillside increased in difficulty at every yard. The long grass, itself an obstacle in the dark, concealed boulders and crevices, over which a way had to be felt with hands of the climbing men, and the advance became a slow scramble."
Go, go. Great, well done. Follow.
The operation seemed a total success. Well before dawn, the exhausted British forces had reached the summit and seen off the few Boers dug in to defend it.
Ian, your grandfather's regiment was in this area over here. The ground, as you can see, is incredibly hard, very rocky. So what they did, they just scooped a little bit of soil out and they piled it up and one can still see it mounded up to some degree here, gathered a few stones, and then they lay down. There's still thick mist around, and they rest. When the mist rose briefly, and they realized just exactly how limited the view was, part of the force moved forward from here right to the edge of the hill.
Because from here you can't see over the lip of the hill, so you don't know who's coming.
No. Let's go and have a look and see where he may have been.
When they moved forward.
That's right.
By 8 o'clock that summer's morning, the sun had burnt off the remaining mist.
Suddenly, they're exposed to Boer riflemen on Conical Hill there, to Boer riflemen here on Green Hill.
Yep.
And then behind Green Hill, there are 4 guns.
Right.
And suddenly there is this horrific rifle fire and shell fire.
And that seems very near.
That's very close.
Just coming at you.
And gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And by 11:45, all the British who were on the edge of the hill had been driven back into the trench. And it was sheer hell from then on. One of the corporals, in a letter writing back home to England, wrote, "For the next 16 hours our noses were buried in the ground, except when we were firing. Shells are a terrible thing to have whizzing over one, but a confounded sight worse to have bursting close to one's head, as dozens did that day. One man, within a few feet behind me, was blown to pieces, and the trenches were soon filled with dead and wounded."
It's almost like a rehearsal for the First World War, isn't it?
In a way.
They did it here first.
That's right, yes. The sun is now rapidly beginning to sink. Decision is taken to actually order a retreat. Extraordinary. But the most amazing thing is that at the same time, the Boers do exactly the same thing. They retire down the hill the other side.
They make the same decision. So at about this time of day, both forces are beginning.
Yeah, well, just a little later than
Yeah.
this. Yeah. Comment on warfare.
Yes.
The cost of warfare. Let's go and have a look at the grave. Ian, this mass grave here, I think many Royal Lancasters are actually buried here.
Where is the trench with the most famous picture of all?
This is it. It's an awful photograph.
Around 350 British soldiers were killed that one day. And overall, 1 in 3 British combatants were either dead, wounded, or taken prisoner. It was the most shocking casualty rate to that date in the history of the British Empire. A month later, the British, William Beddoes with them, did succeed in relieving Ladysmith. Back in Cape Town, Ian is preparing to head home. The other mountain's still on his mind.
I've now been to Spion Kop, and I started thinking, why did I always want to see that one? He was involved in a lot of battles in South Africa subsequently, and a lot of them were victories. But the defeat, that catastrophic moment, somehow was what I wanted to see. And the South African guide said, "I'm always showing British people around Spion Kop. What is it with you people? Do you like defeat?" And I was thinking, well, in a sense, yes, that is what interests us. I mean, Charge of the Light Brigade, Dunkirk, failure, defeat. Somehow, yes, we eventually win these wars, but that isn't the point. Though I'm not sure what the point is, particularly with a war like the Boer War. And I'm thinking of men like both my grandfathers, and there's the poem from the Charge of the Light Brigade. There's not a reason why, there's but to do or die. And someone like me who spends his whole life just asking the question why about everything. They just did it. And seeing that resolution and that discipline and that courage is quite extraordinary.
That last evening in South Africa, there was one final twist in the tale of Ian's quest for his ancestry.
I've just received this package from London. PowerPoint presentation.
Hi Ian, I'm Nick. Now I know you're in South Africa, but I've got some information which I think is really important you get whilst you're still out there. Now here's your family tree, with you at the bottom. And you've been tracking down William Beddoes, who's your mother's father. Whilst you've been doing that, I've looked at the other side of the family, your father's mother, Catherine Matheson, or Kitty. Now I know you never met her, but research has shown that the Matheson clan has a very strong base in Stornoway, all the way back to Murdo Matheson, your great-great-great-grandfather. Now whilst looking through the records, it turns out that he was also a soldier. Murdo signed up to the 78th Regiment, the Seaforth Highlanders, and in 1795 he set sail as part of an expedition to capture Cape Town. So a full century before William Beddoes was out in South Africa, your great-great-great-grandfather also took part in a military expedition. So hopefully this is something you'll find interesting and may even be able to follow up whilst you're still in South Africa.
I have to say that is a fab revelation. So he was originally one of the troops who was sent here to take it from the Dutch, and then generations later my grandfather comes to make sure the Dutch don't get it again.
Overnight, Ian's been mugging up on the Seaforth Highlanders. It turns out Murdo Matheson's regiment took Cape Town, having first landed to the south near Simonstown. Now a short train ride away, and a few stations past the Springboks' home ground.
Well, Murdo Matheson came from Stornoway, so he's seen coastline that looks a bit like this, I would guess. I mean, the weather's slightly better, but I would think when they sailed in, they recognised where they were. This was 100 years before the Boer. This is 1795. This is in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars. George III is on the throne. It's a long time ago, but Scotsmen are still coming down here to the other end of the globe to take towns like this. So it's actually a town called Seaforth. Oh, and a beach, Seaforth Beach. Oh, Murdo Valley. Possibly his? Never know. It's amazing, my great-great-great-grandfather came ashore here. Incredible, 200 years later, the name's still here. Seaforth, all the way from the Hebrides to the tip of Africa.
To get to Seaforth, Murdo would have had to round the legendary Cape of Good Hope, just a few miles to the south. For centuries, this rock where two oceans meet was about the most famous landmark on the map.
It must have seemed like the end of the world to my ancestor, to Murdo. But he didn't stop here, and neither did the British Empire. I found out from the regimental history that Murdo carried on. He went round the corner, left and into the Indian Ocean, and then on to India. And he spent 10 years carving out the British Empire in India. And India is where I hope we're going next. We didn't have to go to India because, thanks to people like Murdo, India came here. The British Empire expanded outwards and came into contact with these worlds and then contracted, and these worlds came with it. So here we are in a Balti house in Stornoway. And this is where Murdo came from. I mean, this is where he was recruited on the great adventure abroad. And he must have seen a poster like this one. This is a copy of the poster, which was a great gung-ho poster to try and get people to join up. And it's addressed to all lads of true Highland blood. Now, there's some question about quite how willingly these volunteers joined up. There was a slight sense that Lord Seaforth, the man who raised the regiment, had said to the king, "I'll deliver you 600 of my people, and it'll be you, you, and you." And what we do know, having ploughed through all these documents, including this, which is amazing. It was a pension record. I mean, I've still got his pension record. He set out from Stornoway, but he didn't come from here. He came from Uig, which is in the west of the island, and that's where I'd like to go. I have to be honest, in the rain today, I can see why you would want to leave Lewes. It's beautiful, but bloody hell. It is odd, all these Scottish soldiers. We even had a record. My father must have had it when I was a boy, and it was about there was a soldier, a Scottish soldier, who wandered far away. So maybe that's what they do, really, is just wander as far away as possible. To be honest, I probably assumed that genealogy was a bit of an anorak hobby, and that people who knew who their great-great-grandfathers were to 7 generations and could trace them were a bit dull. And now I no longer think that. I mean, that may be because I've become dull, but I don't really mind. I think it's been incredibly interesting to find out, for me, the sort of people who my relatives were and the sort of things they did. All that I find both interesting and rather inspiring.
The record suggests that Murdo Matheson lived in a croft in Crowlister, in the parish of Uig, a remote outpost, even for the Outer Hebrides. Donald MacDonald currently works this land.
Hello, Donald. Whoa! It's windy out there. I'm Ian Hislop. Hello. I gather you can tell me something about my ancestor, Murdo Matheson.
Well, he stayed here, out there.
Out where?
Yes. I'll just show you, you know, past the guest house there.
Right. Is that where he lived?
Yes. It was always in this village called Yes Hallamanson. That's Gaelic.
Right.
The Garden of the Mansons.
So the very last leg of Ian's journey to the Garden of the Mathesons.
This is it. This is the ancestral home. Thousands of miles I've gone round the world, and here I am, in the middle of a circle of stones that I suppose I should call home. And actually, I want to leave. But then that's in the spirit of what I've discovered, I think.